Hello guys, how are you all doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel, and today the Tears of the Kingdom countdown continues as I want to discuss how the game may complement or maybe even hurt Breath of the Wild in the eyes of some people. This is really building on a conversation that I've seen kind of growing out there over the course of the past few weeks around Tears of the Kingdom, how incredible it looks and how excited we all are. The game is weeks away, less than 1 month. It is so crazy exciting. I can't freaking wait. I have a whole week taken off of work for the launch week of that game, just like I did when the Switch and Breath of the Wild launched back in 2017. I'm extremely excited. Everyone is extremely excited, and so because of that, lots of conversation, lots of theories and speculation, and of course lots of hype. And with that comes conversations about how Tears of the Kingdom may just relate to Breath of the Wild, how it might be building on that game's legacy and doing more of what Breath of the Wild introduced, and if it's going to make Breath of the Wild seem like a better game or a worse game by comparison, if Tears of the Kingdom is going to sell more, if it's not going to sell more. Lots of fun discussions going around out there. And because of that, like I said, a growing part of that conversation has been discussions around if Tears of the Kingdom could be so much better in terms of execution compared to Breath of the Wild that it might almost ruin Breath of the Wild or make it seem so inferior that it could hurt or tarnish the legacy. And a very common phrase I've seen going around out there, which I do find kind of interesting, is if by comparison Breath of the Wild almost seems like now kind of a tech demo, an early 2017 tech demo for what Nintendo was ultimately trying to achieve with Tears of the Kingdom. Now, I actually find this to be a pretty fascinating and very interesting concept, and in a lot of ways I think it's because I actually find there to be some truth to that idea. I think that it could actually be an accurate thing to say, but I also think it may be a little bit unfair to Breath of the Wild at the same time. And I think it's a very unique thing to consider and to discuss. I definitely do want to stand up for Breath of the Wild in the sense that Breath of the Wild, when it came out, we can't forget what it was like when we all played that game for the first time. And I feel like that happens with a lot of games as time goes on and as years go on, and when maybe new sequels come out, we sometimes have a tendency to forget what a game felt like when it was brand new, when it was the only version of its kind. And in 2017, Breath of the Wild signified such a huge shift in how Nintendo was treating Zelda and developing Zelda and what they wanted it to be and look like and feel like and play like. And it was so exciting and so fresh. I mean, the game, we can't forget how many copies it sold. We can't forget how well it reviewed. We can't forget the fact that it won Game of the Year. And at the time that we all played it for the first time, when it was fresh, we didn't really understand the scope of the game. We didn't understand how big the world was going to be, what it was like to come across 120 shrines across the whole world, play through the Divine Beasts, experience that story, get used to all of the new weapons and everything. I mean, everything that that game introduced, it was so fresh and exciting. We were all having such an amazing, unique experience. That is something I will always remember about Breath of the Wild when it was brand new, was how every single person had their own unique experience. To me, it came down to the Great Plateau, man. That was our introductory kind of training area, and you complete the Great Plateau, and then you're introduced to the idea of now you can jump off and just see what the world has to offer. And so everyone kind of had this different section of the Great Plateau that they jumped off of, and you either went north, south, east, or west, or northeast, or southwest, or whatever you did. And because everyone chose a different point to jump off of the Great Plateau, everyone's initial journey through that world of Hyrule was very unique, and we kept uncovering more and more incredible things. And it was so fun to talk to people I knew and people I was podcasting with and good friends of mine, my younger brother who was playing. And everyone, we were all comparing notes. We were comparing our journeys and the things we were discovering and finding that someone else maybe didn't find yet, because it was our first time opening up that huge map. And so I say all this just to drive home the point that when it was brand new, it really was incredible. Now, it's been 6 years, and a lot of other great games, whether they're Switch games or games on other platforms. We've even had new console generations start with PS5 and Series X. Yeah, as time passes, things that were initially fresh and mind-blowing, they change, they fade sometimes. But that doesn't take away the impact that the game made when it first released. And so, when we talk about Tears of the Kingdom, obviously being a more finalized, fleshed out, realized version of what Breath of the Wild introduced, yeah, Tears of the Kingdom is probably going to be the better game and execute on the ideas of the big scope of this world because it's been a long time. That's what happens. But is it fair to call Breath of the Wild maybe like a tech demo by comparison, like some people have said? Well, I think that, like I said, there's some truth to the idea, and I understand why people say that, but I don't know if that's really fair because of everything I just said about when Breath of the Wild was brand new. But here's the thing. What Tears of the Kingdom is introducing and clearly finishing based on ideas that Breath of the Wild introduced, I think that there's almost no doubt that in terms of execution, Tears of the Kingdom is probably going to be the better game for 99.9% of people. That doesn't mean someone's favorite game can't be Breath of the Wild. I'm somebody who likes to draw a very distinct line between when something is better than something and when something is maybe a personal favorite. A great example for me would be the two Mario Galaxy games. At the end of the day, I can admit that Mario Galaxy 2 is the overall better made game across the board. However, my favorite of the two is Super Mario Galaxy 1 just because of a variety of reasons that I've discussed in the past. And so it's just kind of a good example of what I'm getting at. And so Tears of the Kingdom is introducing some incredible and exciting mechanics that we know Breath of the Wild wasn't able to achieve. Breath of the Wild's real claim to fame, I think, was introducing this huge scope of this amazing open world, what they kind of called, I think open air was the phrase that they were using at the time. It introduced this idea of climbing anything and jumping off of anything and using your glider to sail across the world, and you're breaking weapons and picking up other weapons and all that stuff. And so that was all very unique and very fresh, and it changed up the formula, and it also changed the way other companies approach their open world games, and we've seen that in other games that have come out since Breath of the Wild. Tears of the Kingdom, though, is taking that to the next level because, sure, you're going to be able to do those same things, but when you add into that traversing the sky, traversing those islands, jumping and diving off and skydiving down to Hyrule below in one seamless transition, right? Something that Skyward Sword could not do back in 2011, I've discussed in the past. That is a huge game changer to the idea of just the world itself. And then we already know about a couple of significant adaptations to the gameplay, just with the few things that they've shown us so far, the few abilities, right? The Ascend ability is going to change traversal and puzzle solving hugely. And then, of course, Fuse and Ultra Hand, being able to combine and craft weapons in such an organic way. You're not crafting in the sense that I have these metals to make a sword. You're crafting in the sense that anything in your inventory can be combined to make probably insanely wacky contraptions and tools and weapons. That is going to be just an incredible system to play with. And then Ultra Hand is your world crafting. And so we've seen evidence in a lot of the footage of these insane vehicles and these flying things and just so many things we're going to be able to craft and put together. And that, to me, is taking the base level concepts that Breath of the Wild was introducing to that gameplay and going to the next level and beyond. The sky traversal, the diving, the fusing, the crafting, it's going to be remarkable. And so what I'm willing to bet, this is just a prediction here before myself or anyone else in the world has really played Tears of the Kingdom, but I'm willing to bet that we're going to see, after we've played and completed Tears of the Kingdom, I think that we'll be able to look back on Breath of the Wild and say, okay, even though this game was incredible and like a 10 out of 10 masterpiece when it was brand new in 2017, I think we can now see where that game hit its limitations. I feel like we're going to see limitations when we look back on Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom is going to show us what happens when there were far less limitations, especially when we're talking about Switch hardware uniquely. As we know, Breath of the Wild was designed initially on the Wii U hardware, which was very capable and great for what it was, but Switch is slightly better, and so maybe Breath of the Wild was held back by the then last-gen technology of the Wii U. And now we're getting Tears of the Kingdom at the end of the Switch generation, so they're able to maximize it to a whole different degree than what Breath of the Wild was able to do. So Tears of the Kingdom probably being better and executing on all these crazy new gameplay ideas is going to make Breath of the Wild feel like a game that was held back by its limitations at the time. Now, by the time we get into Switch 2 and next-gen stuff, you know, who's to say, maybe we'll look back on Tears of the Kingdom and say the same thing, but at that point, you're kind of just talking about the general progression of time and the progression of technology, right? I think when you compare specifically Tears of the Kingdom to Breath of the Wild, I think that when people talk about it ruining Breath of the Wild or making Breath of the Wild feel like a tech demo, to me, this is just how I see it. We're going to look back and see Breath of the Wild as a game held back by limitations at the time. But it's still not fair to that game because at the time it released, we didn't feel like there were any limits to that game, right? And so that goes back to the other larger idea I was talking about, where I think sometimes as game fans, we forget that the passage of time changes the impact of a game, and that we're sometimes guilty of forgetting what an amazing game was like when it first released, right? Mario 64, to use another Mario example, right? Mario 64, one of the most impactful and influential video games of all time. As somebody who lived through it as a teenager, I can tell you the huge shift in gaming and the wow factor that game created. Nowadays, it's ancient, and especially kids growing up now, they probably couldn't even play Mario 64. But that's because when the game was new, it had its impact, but eventually gaming moves beyond it, right? And so these are all obvious concepts. I know I'm not blowing anyone's mind by explaining it, but it's just, I think, an organic part of the conversation I wanted to include because we're seeing people talk about this, and I think it's a very fascinating idea. Will Tears of the Kingdom, quote-unquote, ruin Breath of the Wild? Does Breath of the Wild now feel like a tech demo? I do feel like Breath of the Wild was a step to getting to their more fully realized vision with Tears of the Kingdom, but I don't think tech demo is fair, you know, to lobby against one of the greatest games I think ever created. So it'll be interesting and fun to see what Tears of the Kingdom is really like and how everyone reacts to it. I think we know that it's going to be amazing. I am just dying to soar through the skies and experience that whole game. It's going to be a very fun week for myself. And so that's what I think. That's about it.